G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Welcome to the January 4 update on the Barnaby Joyce drought. Wherein at, despite the bright, lovely green tinge, the water holes are dry. This dam used to occasionally go dry. Now, it occasionally holds water. And the crayfish are digging holes, trying to get down to where there might still be a little bit of water to be found. My theory is that the fellow who dug this well, which has actually found a little bit of water down there, probably was the same mining engineer who previously had to abandon this excavation. In some places, most of the trees have retained most of their leaves, and only some have succumbed. Others are stressed out, as you can see by the clumpiness of the foliage, as compared to that on a somewhat healthier tree. Other places in the forest where a lot of trees lost their leaves and went brown and died, epicormal regrowth is fighting and sometimes winning and sometimes losing the battle to save the canopy. The trees are clinging to life because they nearly died coming through winter, water stressed because of two factors. On the one hand, the rainfall seems to have dropped by about 10%, which is why the dam's dry, because the runoff has dropped by 40%. And it doesn't get as cold overnight in winter as it used to do, which means that the ground doesn't get chilled the way it used to do. Here's an example. A friend of mine has an 18-year-old son. When his son was maybe 6 months, a year old, my friend had a job that required him going to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he had to walk in Glen Innes. And he was walking to work at minus 17 degrees Celsius, and he was coming home at 3 in the afternoon at plus 17 degrees Celsius. And if you take your ground down to minus 17 degrees Celsius and cold soak it all night, then a couple of hours of plus 17 degrees Celsius doesn't actually warm the soil deeper than a centimetre or two. So what happens when the soil gets cold is the plant's metabolic rate slows down, and that means they don't use much water. So once upon a time, their metabolic rate was low enough that they did not dry out in the winter. But now they get less water and they have to grow all through the year on it. And as somebody who chose to live in the forest 30 years ago, that changes everything. The global warming that a lot of people in politics find it fashionable not to believe in is turning the Australian forests into fuel bombs. Today in Victoria, they're expecting 42 degrees. And then after that, they're going to get a cool change, which is going to bring 100 km/h wind gusts at 90 degrees across their fire front. If the weather gods so decree. And how did we come to get to be here, living in a fuel bomb, terrified of the next heat wave? How many have we had in the past 12 months? I lost count. We came to be here specifically because the political leaders of the Western industrialised democracies have chosen to pursue economic growth, regardless of environmental factors. And apparently, the game plan is to continue to attempt to grow the economy in further pursuit of prosperity until something breaks, when the wheels fall off the biosphere and the global village's international economy is destroyed by the increasingly frequent and increasingly intense extreme weather events, record-breaking weather events. Then everybody just fights each other and then starves and dies. That is the official plan. So anyway, how is the Barnaby Joyce drought going? I used to call it the Barnaby Joyce drought as a wry, ironic, sarcastic, sardonic Australian sort of a thing to say, because he was the agriculture minister and deputy prime minister, and he was the fellow who pursued all the policies which led to the drought, i.e. digging and extracting and burning and exporting ever more fossil fuels, running ever more animals, digging more holes, trashing the environment, clearing whatever forest appeared to be necessary in the pursuit of profits. So how's the Barnaby Joyce drought going? Those of you familiar with my channel will be familiar with this chart, wherein that I went back to 2002 to get my rainfall results, coming up with a maximum and minimum and actual rainfall figures and average figures for 2018, which in September had actually become average, kind of sort of for the month. So October, 42.95. 42.95 against an average of 70.1. Oops. November, 77.45 against an average of 103.8. Oops again. December, 89.85 millimetres with 1.05 millimetre being due against 103.9. This is not going to be pretty. Okay, so all of that on the alligator, 545.65 millimetres, as against an average of 825.9 if you add up all the monthly averages, or 830 if you go back over the years and take the yearly averages. So if we say 828 is an annual average, what we got was 65.8%. So we're missing almost 35% of what rain we would normally have expected to receive in an average year, which is that green line. So if we now plot and so that's with October and November plotted. Now let's have a look at December. We get a view of the world that looks like that. So we had 9 months of below average rain. We had 1 month of lower than we've ever had it in that month. We had 2 months of above average rain, 1 month of average rain. And we're missing 34.2% of our annual average rain. which on the annual How Goes It chart looks like that. So this is what the people of the electorate of New England have got for themselves by voting to re-elect Barney Baby Joyce. We put him back in there as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Agriculture, and we did that in December 2017 when we were getting above average rainfall and things was looking pretty good. And after we inflicted Barney Baby Joyce onto Australia, everything went to shit. Things is crook in Tullarook, because we'll all be ruined, said Hanrahan. And wait, there's more! Not only, but also, if we go back to 2007, the earliest of my calendars on which I was writing minimum and maximum temperatures for the day, after treating myself to a maximum minimum recording thermometer. Head high on the south side of the trees in a ventilated, insulated container. And seeing as everybody's been complaining about how hot it is, I'm in a position to tell you that as well as 1.05 millimetres of dew, the average minimum temperature this year in December was 14.12 degrees. The average maximum temperature was 27.7 degrees. The lowest temperature was one morning at 10 degrees. There were 3 days of 18 degrees as the minimum temperature, 7 days of 30, 2 of 32, and 1 of 33. That's what this month of December was like, as comparificated to December 2007, when the average minimum was 13.2 degrees Celsius, 10 degrees was the lowest, 28 degrees was the maximum. One day where it reached 28 degrees, one day where it was 17 degrees, coldest that it got. 13.2 to 22.2, 14.1 to 27.7. The coldest morning was nearly a degree warmer than it was 11 years ago in December. The hottest day was 5.5 degrees hotter on average, and we went from one day where it reached 28 degrees Celsius, 7 days 30 above, 2 of them at 32, and 1 of 33. So, there you go. And now you know how goes the Barnaby Joyce drought of 2018-2019. The drought, which apparently isn't over yet, because we haven't had a really serious fire followed by a flood. And that's how droughts end in Australia. First there's the drought, then there's the heat wave, then there's the fire, followed by the flood. We've had some pretty good storms with hail and wind and flash flooding and all that sort of inconvenience. As I was too polite to say to my cousin's daughter, who was telling me about a hailstorm in Sydney, these things are coming to the places and visiting the people who voted for cheaper electricity by burning more fossil fuel. These are coming to the people who voted to grow the economy by getting rid of the carbon tax so they could have cheaper fuel in their cars as well. All this shit and misery we're getting from the weather, this is what you get when you vote for a bunch of liberal, national, corrupt, crony, capitalist, economy-driven neo-fascists. Look at that. A gift from a sulphur-crested cockatoo, a white feather, left here perhaps as a token for somebody who was too lazy to do anything but try and personally reduce one's fossil fuel consumption and carbon footprint upon the planet. No doubt I should have done more, but I couldn't think of anything. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao. Barnaby Joyce the failure, he wants to rule Australia, but the trouble you see with Barney baby is he suffers from coprolalia, coprolalia, coprolalia. Correct medical terminology for one who talks a lot of